Today, we will be discussing the second American Civil War. So I want to make the argument that a conflict is very likely, and so we'll be discussing why it's likely, how this war will manifest itself, and what will happen after this war. The first thing to know about America is that it is a country that enjoys violence. Okay, you can say that Americans are addicted to violence. Okay, so for example, America has 434 million guns. That's 1.3 guns for every one person. And the guns they have, a lot of them are like semi-machine guns. Okay, so it's a very gun-obsessed society. Not only that, but they believe that gun ownership is their sacred right as Americans. So the Second Amendment of the Constitution is that every American has the right to bear arms. Then there's American football. Have you guys seen American football, where guys just bang at each other? Okay, it is extremely violent sport. In fact, America is really the only country that plays this sport, and Americans love football. The Super Bowl is the most watched TV event every year. The game of football causes a lot of psychological injuries. Okay, so there are a lot of football players who at age 30, they either commit suicide or they will kill someone because their brains have been destroyed by the game. Okay? It is extremely violent sport, and even though it is barbaric, Americans love it. Americans also worship their history of wars. Okay? They believe that fighting wars, it's noble and it's sacred. Second thing to know about America is that it has a long history of fighting wars. In fact, you can make the argument that America has been continuously at war since its founding in 1776, okay? Even before that. So the first major war that America fought, of course, was the Revolution, right? 1776, War of Independence. The reality is that Americans believed this war was sacred, and it was a revolution in human affairs. But if you actually look at the history of this war, you'll discover that the Americans didn't really fight this war for a good reason. They fought this war because the British were taxing them. But if you think about it, well, the British were providing defense. They were providing the army, right? So the British had a very good reason to tax the Americans. But the Americans didn't really like this, so they rebelled, okay? And the rebellion was actually the first American Civil War because there were actually a lot of Americans who wanted to remain in the Union. And so these loyalists, a lot of them were terrorized by extremists who wanted independence. Okay, so that is the American Revolution. But after the American Revolution, the Americans embarked on something called Manifest Destiny. And the idea of Manifest Destiny is that it is God's will that America controls all of the Americas, okay? North America and South America. So the Americans embarked on a violent colonization of all lands, okay? Killing many natives and other peoples to control America, okay? Manifest Destiny. And then this led to, from 1861 to 1865, the American Civil War, okay, which killed 800,000, a million Americans, okay? But it was the deadliest war that America ever fought, okay? Much more so than World War II and World War I. In fact, more people died in this war than in World War I and World War II combined for America. And if you looked at the reason for the Civil War, they didn't actually have to fight this war, okay? So at the founding of the nation, America was divided into North and South. And the difference is that the North was very industrial, and the South was agricultural. Okay? And because the economies were different, the way they structured their politics and culture and society were different. So the North believed in free labor, meaning that you were free to do any job you want, and employers were free to hire anyone they wanted. And this system is obviously much more efficient because it's a much better use of manpower. And so this caused the North to prosper and become very, very wealthy and expanded, okay? So at the start of the Civil War in 1861, the North had a population of 22 million people, okay? Very wealthy, very powerful. The South was an agricultural-based economy, and therefore it had to rely on slave labor. And even though slave labor made wealthy people very prosperous, it was not good for the economy as a whole, okay? It was an inefficient use of manpower. And at the start of the war, they only had about 9 million people. Okay? But what's important to remember is that the North was an industrial-based economy. The South was an agricultural-based economy. So in terms of weapons manufacturing, in terms of logistics, in terms of organization, the North had a huge advantage over the South. Now, why did they fight the war?